Hi, my name is Kimberly Pace, and I am faculty in the Department of Political Science and also the coordinator of Women's Studies on campus. And I am thrilled to be able to share some of my own experiences with infusing curriculum with diversity, equity, and inclusion as part of it. And I've been doing this work for a very long time. It seems like I am part of the NCBI team, National Coalition Building Institute, here on campus, and I have been for several years. I am part of the Faculty Senate Diversity Subcommittee, and I am also a subcommittee for Faculty Senate Diversity Committee, I guess. And I'm also part of the Diversity Action Council here and the subcommittee for community campuses. I have always had a strong belief in the ideals behind doing this type of work, diversity, equity, inclusion, and I've tried to infuse it in my courses. And I teach a wide variety of classes. Our department of political science is relatively small, so you end up teaching a wide variety of classes. And I try to make a special effort to do that in all of my courses. And the class that I want to share with you here for this purpose is Political Science 311. And this is a course that is, not only is it a requirement for our major, it is also a requirement, let me pull this up here, it's not a requirement, it is, well, it's a requirement for the major. It's also a GER, and I teach it for everybody, right? And so this is also incorporating climate change, and I've titled it Big Bend, Palestine, Maori, and Beyond. So again, as I said, this is Political Science 311. It is the comparative politics course, and it is a requirement, as I said, for all of our majors. It's also an upper division social science GER, and there's the official course description there. What I do with this course in terms of climate is when we are in face-to-face, I divide the students into groups of 3 to 5 each, depending on the size of the class. And I assign each team or group to a different country. And in the last class that we just did, these are some of the courses or the countries that I used. And each team had the entire class, the entire semester to basically cover basics. What is the structure of the government, political structure? What about economics, things like literacy rates, religion, population pyramids, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the beginning. I shifted it during COVID, and each student did their own country individually. Instead of working in groups, they did it individually, and then they peer reviewed. It was very interesting to do it that way, and it seemed to work pretty well. And in addition to climate, I also had the students do an additional step, and that is that each team or individual, in case of COVID, had to research and report out on how their country was being affected by climate. What, if anything, was their government doing about climate and climate crisis? What were the successes or failures that were encountered? What were private citizens, groups, NGOs, were any involved in helping to find out the answers that worked for them? What were the government signatories to major climate accords, Kyoto or Paris? And finally, were the government leaders deniers of climate crisis? And if that was the case, then how did they handle that? But an additional step, and the additional step was where the idea of diversity and inclusion comes in, equity and inclusion comes in. And this is the final step. And I had each team or individual research and report out on the indigenous people that were in their assigned country. And for many people, many students in the class, they had not even considered the fact that there were indigenous people in their country. So they got to learn all about their indigenous peoples. And I asked them to find out how they were being treated by the government. Were they being treated in an equitable fashion? And very sadly, the answer to that question was almost always no. What was the indigenous people's response to a changing climate? How did that align or not align with the official government position? It was fascinating to see what my students came up with. Just amazing to see what they found out. And they became defensive of their country's indigenous people. What, if anything, were the indigenous peoples doing to combat a changing climate? It was fascinating because we had Maori in New Zealand, we had the Aborigines in Australia, we had the Roma in Hungary, and the Sami people, right? I mean, we just had amazing different representation of indigenous groups. And it was amazing what indigenous peoples are doing, that so much we could learn from, right? And finally, I had them each compare their climate crisis results and their study of the indigenous peoples that lived within their assigned country with at least one other country, and then to the United States and what we were doing. And I can absolutely hands down tell you that it was definitely not boring. The students got very engaged, and it was amazing to see how insightful they became in terms of what it was that they were learning, how they challenged each other with what they had learned. And in the end, I truly do believe that they came out of this course much more dedicated to not only climate change, but also learning more about indigenous peoples and what they could learn from the indigenous peoples. So I hope that that gives you an insight in terms of what I did in my class. It was a great time, and I will absolutely continue to do it in the future. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.